In today's video I'll show you how I created this beautiful arrangement of Syngoniums. Hey everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. You most likely know me for my plants on moss poles, and in 9 out of 10 times I like to grow my plants vertically in line with the way that these climbing aeroids would grow in nature. In nature they climb up trees, and as they grow up trees they mature, and usually maturity is what I'm after. I like to see my plants transform from teeny tiny small plants into these really large show-stopping plants with really big leaves ideally. But that's not the case for all of the plants that I grow. Syngoniums in particular, I don't necessarily appreciate when grown to maturity. Specifically, all of the podophyllum types or hybrids or forms, or whichever technical word the correct terminology would be. I don't necessarily like the way that this Syngonium matures, so I wanted to keep it small. I wanted to keep it fairly juvenile so that it retains these arrow-shaped leaves. I like them best. Now, that's why I didn't put it on the moss pole in the first place, because I actually have no desire in seeing this plant mature, but I also didn't want to grow it vertically on some type of other support like a stake or something like that. I really wanted to create a nice lush, like bushy plant out of it. This plant naturally wants to climb. It doesn't naturally want to grow that bushy. So to create a nice display like that, I'm going for quantity over quality actually. So there's probably 20 odd cuttings in here by now, and each cutting really only has 2 or 3 leaves, creating this really nice lush display. Before we talk about this particular display in a little bit more detail, let's take it back to 5 months ago when I started this project. I have this beautiful Syngonium Mojito. My apprehension in saying beautiful is because I'm not the biggest fan of plants going wild. Like, I don't know, I mean, obviously I want him to grow true to nature or as close to nature as possible, but I do like to, let's say, manage their growth a little bit more in a way that is aesthetically pleasing to me, if that makes sense, right? I personally just like organization. I don't like plants growing too wild. Outdoors, that's fine, but this plant has grown indoors and it just makes me uneasy. I don't know. Each to their own, but this is not necessarily how I like to grow plants. Nothing against this as it looks right now, but where is it going from here? I don't see how this could get nice without me doing something about it. I hope that makes sense. Also, yep, it has quite a lot of roots and quite a small pot. And if you look at it from the back over here, you can just see how many vines and aerial roots and whatnot. They're all just supported by a garden stake so that the thing doesn't flop over. Now, let me show you what it would look like without the garden stake. Let me get rid of that. Ta-da! Bye. Now, the problem in using a garden stake is that this was purely supporting the plant. It just stopped the plant from flopping over. It didn't do anything to the plant when it comes to growing benefits or propagation benefits. So I should have probably put it on a moss pole, but I didn't want it to be on a moss pole because I never wanted this to grow tall and large and mature. I always wanted to grow this into a really nice horizontal lush display with lots and lots of small plants. It all started off with just 1, and by now I probably have 10, no, 1, 2, 3, by now I have 6 plants in here, or 7, and all of that just because I kept propagating once it got too tall. But I got a bit lazy over the last half a year or so. I had other priorities, so I wasn't really able to propagate it too much. There's some propagations I took a few, I don't know, months ago maybe. They're also going to go back into the pot, so it's going to get lusher and lusher. I need more room for roots. I need to do something with it, so today that's what I want to do. But these long vines, they're useless, right? They, like, not useless, but they're not necessarily what I want from this plant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some cuttings and I'm going to do some further propagations, because it's always good to have a few more propagations planned. I think I actually just took cutting a couple of weeks ago here. I'm gonna take lots and lots of propagations, because why not? This is already a mess. And the problem with these are they have aerial roots, but none of them actually have grown proper water roots. So these are not ready to be potted up just yet. If I would have grown this on the moss pole, each node would have grown a proper root system within the moss pole. So if I'd now be taking it off the moss pole, I could pop them into the pot straight away, because they'd already be propagated. But because I didn't do that, I need to propagate them in water first. Up this one and this one. Alright, of course it looks a little bit sad now, but that's okay. I have a long-term vision here. Maybe we need to cut all of this. Okay, better. I do have a long-term vision over here, so all of these will get propagated in water. Wow. So I'll let the cuts dry out a little bit before I'll pop them in the vase. In the meantime, let's work on repotting this one. And I want to go with an orchid pot, very shallow, but quite a large diameter. It's 30 centimeters in diameter. So then I can really get this horizontal spread of the plant and create a really nice lush display, rather than aiming for height. Okay, I'll put a little layer of aeroid mix in here first. Let's take this. Now, I shouldn't have left it that long, because it's going to be a pain to get these roots through the holes without ripping a lot of them. So ideally don't leave it that long. I could also cut the pot apart to hopefully recover as many of these roots as possible, but I'm just going to go with YOLO. Obviously the more roots the better. Ooh. I think that worked pretty well. Obviously the more roots the better, but I also just cut like 80% of this plant off, so the existing plant in here doesn't need all too many roots. Whee! So I just shake it apart a little bit, so that I can actually separate all of these plants a little bit, so that they're not all just cramped in one spot, but rather take up a larger section of the pot. Okay, definitely added a bit too much aeroid mix at the beginning. Okay, I like that, and then I take the new cuttings and I just pop them on the side as well. There's no major plan here. This is really just, let's see how it goes. Top it up with aeroid mix, see how we go. Okay. Oh, I forgot one. Let me bring you closer. Now, you can see this, plenty of empty room. Now, it doesn't look the best, but it looks somewhat lush. Might as well cut a couple more. I really want these existing shoots to start shooting out from the base. Create more. I want like 20 cuttings in there. 20 cuttings just have 2 leaves each, that's still 40 leaves. That's better than having one vine with 40 leaves hanging somewhere in the corner of my basement. Alright, now give it some time. Proof is in the pudding. I will put these in water this afternoon once they had a little bit of time to dry out to prevent rot. I'll water this and then I will update you on once there's updates to share. See you soon. Hello everybody, we are back. I need to get my scissors, one moment. Do you want to start the video, baby? Do you want to start it? Hello everybody and welcome back to... Sorry. Do you want to share? We share, okay? Hi everybody. And welcome back. It has been 2 months since the last video and I thought I'll share with you an update. First things first, I think this is looking very pretty and lush. There are definitely lots and lots of yellow leaves though that I'm here to just chop off, which was to be expected as part of kind of the propagation process and so on. So not shocked about that at all. There's plenty of new leaves that you can see. I mean, you can really see the lighter colored ones over here. They're all new. So I'm really liking what this has become or what this has turned into. Certainly giving me this sort of table display vibe that I wanted, just really lush. And I also had many propagations and they're also pretty lush over here. I have already separated out 2 or 3 of them and gave them to Tim as part of his garden makeover. But I wanted to see if I can add maybe a few more into this pot without causing too much damage. Would you like some spanky spanks? Yeah, that's good, huh? Okay, so what am I gonna do? I acknowledge this table is quite small, but let's have a look. Good roots in here, not bad. And let's just see if there's maybe like a few that have a really good root system. Specifically, I want, like if it's already super leggy, I don't want it for this display. I might just give those to Tim. Well, this one is not rooted, this one has a root. Hey, Bradley, I'm always so proud of how you don't nibble on my plants and now you're doing it just to get my attention. Yeah, these are all decent. Again, too leggy for my needs today. And let's leave some of these like this, for example, I could just easily root this a little bit longer, but I'm not concerned if like 1 or 2 don't make it, if that makes sense. I think I have plenty to choose from. Okay, there's a few left that I'll put back in the water. And you know what, I'll just pop in the water as well, just to keep it looking nice and lush. And I pop that back into my forest. These are probably way too many cuttings to add into this pot, but hey baby, come on. So, but I like to push it. So specifically around the edge, I feel like there's a little bit of plant missing. So let's try that. And just pop them in here, and I'm not being super careful here. Beautiful. Maybe a little bit here. Oops. Now guys, this is not a display to optimize each individual plant's growth, right? If I want to optimize the growth of each individual plant, I will give this plant more room rather than adding more cuttings into the same pot to give it less room. So this is not to mature it, this is really to create a nice lush display. And that is always something you need to keep in mind. I often get asked, what would you do in this instance, blah blah blah. And it's like, well, just because I would do something in a specific instance doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do. You need to consider what you want to achieve. It's like life. What do you want to do? Just because one person thinks that this is the right avenue for you to take does not mean that that's the right thing for you. We can have different goals in life. We can have different goals with different plants. Now this plant has actually been upstairs. Upstairs I've got like a little storage area, and there's one nice skylight. And I don't really use it for anything. I hardly go up there. But there's a nice skylight up there, so I figured let's just put a few plants that are kind of like an experiment or they're in development. Let's put them there so they can grow nicely without taking up any of my precious space here, and then once I'm happy with them, I'll take them down and then they can be a display. Alright, here we are. That is it. I'll pop it back into the planter. It looks extra lush now. I will give it a little bit more time to grow in and I'll check in with you soon. Alrighty, thank you so much, Jan from the past, and here we are. So it's been 5 months since I started the project. That's obviously not 5 months since I've got the plant. The plant was already quite well grown at the beginning of this project. As you saw at the beginning of the video, it definitely wants to climb. Now, it's not naturally gonna climb up that garden stake. The roots are not attracted to the garden stake. They don't care about the garden stake. I had to manually tie it to the garden stake to create the vertical display, and that's why I normally like to use moss poles. Roots seek moisture, so as the plant climbs up the moss pole, roots will grow into the moss pole, so the plant will actually naturally grow up a moss pole, which is just not going to be the case with that little garden stake. Anyway, we're not here to talk about moss poles, we're here to talk about the opposites. Let me bring you a little bit closer, let me show you what happened, and then I'll talk to you a little bit more about the plant in itself. So you can see that there's lots and lots of cuttings in here. You can see that some of these cuttings that I added most recently are only now starting to produce their first leaves. So not all of the cuttings in here have actually produced or are contributing to the growth. But let's have a look at this, for example. You can see this is a new leaf over here. So it has a bit of dust on it. And you can see that this just shot out of the pot, right? So here's a little cutting. And that's one of these cuttings I added very late. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted these new leaves to come out of the pot and not come out of a node that's somewhere up here, right? Would defeat the purpose and wouldn't necessarily make the plant nice and lush. It would just make the plant leggy. Now you can see that, of course, as always, some plants usually shoot the lights out. So this plant, for example, over here is growing the best. So there's already a few nodes that are not making contact with the substrate. What I could do here is I could just pin this down to make it touch the substrate, and it would then hopefully root into the substrate as well. So the first 3 months of this project, I had the plant upstairs where it was getting light from a skylight. That skylight comes from above, hence why most of these leaves are also facing kind of up, right? And that's also on purpose. I didn't want to have one display side for this pot. I wanted this pot to kind of be nice from all sides. Now, since I added the last bunch of cuttings, I actually moved it to my north-facing window right next to you down here, where it does get light from the front. So at the moment, this side is facing the window and this one is facing away, but that was never the plan. The plan was actually for me to remember to rotate it, which I forgot about. But that's the plan going forward. I want to rotate this plant so the plant grows evenly in all directions and doesn't have this one direction where all of the leaves face and then all of the growth will be directed to as well, and then kind of just flops over there. I want to keep this consistent. Now I do have more propagations actually. I want to show you. They look a little bit sun stressed. I think they're a little bit too close to the grow light, but that is also okay. You can definitely see that the variegation seems to be coming out a little bit better under the grow light. But of course, all of these cuttings are challenged because they're putting all of the energy into building roots at the moment, which is exactly what I want them to do. So that's all good. Let me take it out. I mean, oh my God, heaps of roots. Oh my God, what am I gonna do with this? Probably nothing. I just put it back and forget about it. Let's do that. But I'm not going to add any further in here. I think the other propagations are just going to go to Timmy's, and I'm going to keep an eye on shoots like this, for example, over here, that is getting a little bit leggy. I will probably just have to continuously propagate these plants. This is not a set and forget thing. As I mentioned throughout the update, like I'd rather have 20 cuttings that produce 2 leaves to get to 40 leaves than having 2 vines with 20 leaves each, right? Well, that 20th leaf will be somewhere in my neighbor's garden rather than in this pot. So as I continue with this, there'll be more and more cuttings, so each cutting can have 1 or 2 leaves. And the reason why I want to do that as well is because of the way that the variegation works with this mojito. Now, this is just from my observation. To be honest, I did not do any research on this. I like this to be like a experience-driven hobby rather than a reading into it hobby, if that makes sense. From what I have experienced, the variegation in the mojito fades pretty pretty quickly. So older leaves will no longer show that variegation, or it will be very green on green. It's the newer leaves that show the variegation the best. Which means that I want to have as many new leaves as possible at all times. So if I have 20 or 30 cuttings in here and each of them produce one new leaf, then I have 20 beautiful variegated leaves, right? Whereas if I have 2 vines and each of them just produces 1 leaf, then I have 2 nice leaves and the rest is just going more and more green. So it's not just for display purposes, it's also for, well, I suppose looking at the variegation is also part of the display, but you know what I mean. I'm trying to have as many new fresh leaves as possible, and because I'm not aiming at this plant growing large leaves anyway, all of the little setbacks by the continuous propagation are also irrelevant for my purposes. Now surprisingly actually, this is not super root bound. I'm thinking this is probably going to be the first issue once this plant grows more and more, that the pot in itself might just not have enough medium for all of these little cuttings to establish a root system. But because each cutting also only needs to sustain 1 or 2 or potentially 3 leaves, I don't think each cutting requires a ginormous root system. But see how we go. So far so good. Now I'm not super happy with the variegation that this plant is currently showing, and I believe that's because we're just in winter and this is only getting natural light. So I'm not supplementing the light for this plant at all. And while it is in a north-facing window, my courtyard is very much protected by trees as well as the neighbor's house, so I hardly get any direct sun hitting this, which is a good thing in summer, but in winter the direct sun is actually quite nice. So I do believe that this variegation is becoming more prominent if you provide this plant with more light. I don't think temperatures are the issue, because I'm keeping this room pretty nice at like around 20 degrees at all times. So I do think it is the light exposure. It is getting enough light to grow, but I don't think it's getting enough light to really bring out the best variegation possible. So let's see how we go once we head into summer, and I hopefully am able to provide this plant with more light. I am thinking this is a good candidate to go into my garden as well, maybe have it as a nice little table display on my coffee table outside. Let's talk about the actual display part. So this is in an orchid pot, as I mentioned, and I think I bought that orchid pot at the Plant Collectors Fair like 2 years ago. I actually am looking for a place to get more of these. I could just Google. This is just a storage, it's very dirty, I should really maybe give this a good clean. But this is really just a storage basket. It is from a Korean storage place somewhere in Chatswood. I'll Google and I'll put the name on screen down there. But it was actually just a storage container. It comes with a lid as well. And I thought it's nice and lightweight. It is waterproof because it's made from plastic, so I can water it and the water can sit there. I don't need to worry about it leaking onto the floor and so on. And it's very cost effective. And I don't think it makes a bad looking pot. I don't necessarily love the handles. They kind of give it away that this is not a pot, but it makes it actually really convenient if I want to shake it. But there's a different pot that I also want to show you, and I'll just bring over this other display that I've got there. I'm following the same principle with my LUSH display of anthuriums over here. They are also in an orchid pot. Then I have a big saucer from Bunnings, and then this pot over here is also from Bunnings, but it has a big drainage hole. I don't like pots with drainage holes because that's just a disaster for the wooden floors, right? So need the saucer in there. But there's something really smart I've done with this one that I should probably do with this one as well. Let me show you. You can see my dining table there, right? So this one lives on my dining table, and I wanted to grow kind of in all directions where possible as well. Again, I'm not being the best at twisting it. I think this side looks not as lush as the one that I showed you initially, so let's just quickly turn it around. But what I've done with this plant, I actually have a little Lazy Susan over here. At least that's what we call it in Australia. I don't know, is it called Lazy Susan everywhere? Like a rotating tray table maybe? Anyway, we call it Lazy Susan. It's from IKEA, and I actually think that this material goes quite well with like kind of my interior design style anyway. I like the light colored wood, natural whites and so on at the moment. So what I've done here, I'll just put this on my dining table, and I then put this on top. And I don't think it looks that bad. I mean, it's looks a bit different on this tiny table, and then I can easily rotate it, or it kind of naturally rotates a little bit. As you bump into it, it kind of just spins around and so on. So I don't need to really make a conscious effort in rotating it, because it's on the Lazy Susan, it kind of just spins around. Does that make any sense? Probably not. I mean, look, I put this here in the middle of the table, and then, you know, when we have dinner, we move it here, for example, and it automatically just spins around a little bit. You know what I mean? I don't have a schedule. I'm not like, oh, every Wednesday I rotate this plant by 90 degrees. And quite clearly I don't, because I never rotated this plant over here. So I should probably head to IKEA and buy this one a little Lazy Susan as well. So I can kind of just, you know, I have an easier time just spinning it around and kind of making it grow a little more evenly. But yeah, anyway, I thought that was a cool little top tip for creating lush displays 360 degrees around the pot, rather than it all facing one way, because the direction of the light will always dictate in which direction the leaves will face. Apart from that, I don't have all too many crazy care tips to share about the Syngonium in itself, because I'm basically just perpetually propagating this plant. I'm not really trying to optimize the plant's growth. I'm just hoping that some of the propagation survive. That's really my strategy with this. And well, so far so good, right? So yeah, I don't think I have all too much to share. I think my top tip is really try and increase light to increase the variegation. Of course, I always fertilize using my GT Foliage Focus, as I do with all of my other plants. It's in my chunky aeroid mix that I use for all of my aeroids. Now, I made it slightly less chunky than when I pot up a moss pole, because the moss pole requires more frequent watering, so naturally it's a more moist environment with a moss pole, whereas this one doesn't have one. So I added a few more water retentive elements to the substrate, so for example cocoa peat, to prevent myself from having to water it too frequently. It's winter at the moment, growth is slow, so I'm not watering this all too frequently, but when it's raining, because it's right next to the door, I just take it, I just pop it into the rain, and that gives the leaves a nice little clean as well, which I can always recommend. Of course, only if it's not minus 20 degrees outside. So yes, I love Mother Nature taking care of the watering for me, but only if it doesn't induce a crazy amount of shock to the plant. I hope you enjoyed this little video, and I hope it inspired you to create a little lush display of something as well, and maybe it gave you some inspiration on what you can do with a climber if you don't want to let it climb. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and leave a nice comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye!